Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Slidin into my DMs, and welcome to all of my DMs. Thanks for being here, guys. We've got Mr. Rogers over here, who's apparently still trapped in Barovia.
I can't get out. I haven't figured it out. I'm just stuck.
I know the feeling. We have Preston down below, who's in front of a beautiful green screen with nothing on it.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll bet something's coming later.
This is like one of those. Just do it. You gotta make your own video. Put whatever you want back there.
And then we have Corey, who is apparently a mad scientist today or something.
Oh, hang on just a second.
Whoa.
There. Better?
Changed? Yes, sure.
That was magic.
I want to ask, but I'm afraid to ask.
All I can say, terms of the contract that got me out of hell.
Got it. Okay.
Alchemy.
Something to do with
Chemistry.
mixing things.
Thankfully,
I'm sure somewhere down the line
malfunctions.
We'll see.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Couple of quick announcements. We are quickly making our way to 10,000 subscribers. I'm anticipating that we're going to have our little gauntlet episode coming up here probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Again, as a reminder, I'm going on vacation next week, starting tomorrow, so there won't be regular episodes next week, but I'm sure you'll be fine, and I will too. So
just
anyway.
Go watch the Blade Singer 2.0 and go learn all about
Blade Singer. That's right.
Yep.
In case you haven't yet.
And if you've already watched that, go back and watch. There's plenty. There's what, 34 of them now?
34.
Yep.
Oh.
And thanks for those who don't know to Mr. Rogers, who has taken up the editing work on my videos lately, and I'm sure you've all noticed an uptick in the quality. And so you have him to thank for that, if in that case.
It's all downhill from here.
Let's jump into our discussion today. So, as usual, we've got a quick ruling and then a larger conversation. And for the quick ruling, I want to ask you guys about 2 feats and how they might potentially interact with one another. So, the Piercer feat and the Great Weapon Fighting Style. I guess I should have said fighting style and a feat, not 2 feats. Great Weapon Fighting Style. So let me read the description of each of these, and you guys help me understand how 2 things actually. What I want to know. I want to know how you would interpret this rules as written, but also B, how you might allow this to be played at your table. If there's a difference, why? Excuse me. So. Let me just read off the feats the feat and the fighting style really quick. Piercer. Okay. Once per turn, there's a few things that you get, but in particular, once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals piercing damage, you can re-roll one of the attack's damage dice, and you must use the new roll. Okay. And then couple that with Great Weapon Fighting Style. When you roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage die, for an attack you make with a melee weapon that you are wielding with 2 hands, you can re-roll the die and must use the new roll, even if the new roll is a 1 or a 2. The weapon must have the versatile or 2-handed property for you to gain this benefit. So my question is, if I am wielding a weapon with 2 hands that also does piercing damage, and I have the Piercer feat and the Great Weapon Fighting Style, how do these interact with one another? I roll a 1, I get to just re-roll it once because I have a Great Weapon Fighting Style. Does Piercer not come into effect? Do you have to choose one or the other, or can you potentially use them both and re-roll a couple of times? Again, obviously I would need to be using like a pike, for example. I need 2-handed and it does piercing damage, or a spear. It's versatile. I could use it with 2 hands, right? A lance. So yeah, I'm contemplating doing a build with incorporating both of these things, even though some people are going to complain that Great Weapon Fighting Style is weak and shouldn't be used. And I get the argument, but regardless, I need to know, I think beforehand, how to interpret this if these 2 things interact with each other. So what are your guys' thoughts?
So rules as written, I would say that because they both say that you have to use the new roll,
Mhm.
you would only be able to activate one of their abilities for a specific dice.
Okay.
However, that doesn't mean that you can you re-roll all the ones and twos with great weapon fighting, and then with piercer you take a 3 and try and get higher.
Right.
Like, that's up to you.
Sure.
That's a risky play, obviously.
Sure.
That's definitely taking the average and trying to go lower,
Right.
as far as I can tell.
Right.
But rules as written, I don't think that it would be a situation where even at my home table, I don't know if that would be a situation where I'd be like, oh, well, you can re-roll those and then re-roll them again if you don't like the result because of your second feat.
Because you have a feat or a fighting style that sort of complements. Okay. Mr. Rogers, Preston,
I'll take a different approach.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I would basically say that the great weapon fighting would take precedence first, and then when you hit, then the piercer feat I would allow to have happen after the fact. They do allow you to re-roll stuff, but they do it for different things. And if someone's going to take a feat both these feats and forego an ability score increase, I would be okay with basically just
letting them benefit from it.
Like if someone wants to take both of them, I think that's taking enough of a hit to their stats, so to speak, that they're not going to be hitting their.
They sacrificed in order to get that, so you let them have a benefit from it.
And the one is once per turn, so the piercer is just once per turn, whereas with the great weapon fighting is every time, isn't it?
Yeah. Anytime you make an attack with a melee weapon that you're wielding, you're rolling damage. You can re-roll the die, and you must use the new roll. So yeah, that's true. I was about to say, probably for rules as written, I'd maybe just not take the great weapon fighting style then if I were using, let's say, a lance with 2 hands or a pike or whatever, just because they seem superfluous. And the piercer feat says no matter what I roll, right? So if I'm rolling a d10, maybe I would want to re-roll on a 3, right? But the great weapon fighting style says only on 1s or 2s. Of course, if you get to do it on every single time that you are rolling for damage with that weapon, it might be,
especially if you're like smiting.
Yeah. And of course,
I see the argument the other way for sure. Like, and especially for like rules as written, I don't know that you'd probably pick one or the other, but just at my table, that's probably how I'd roll it.
And of course, with piercer, there are other benefits that come along with it. Namely, and I think the main reason why people take the piercer feat is because if you crit, you get to roll an extra die with it. So
gotcha. Anyway,
it's got me thinking. What do you think, Mr. Rogers? Anything different that you'd maybe add?
No, I agree with Corey. I think that's the correct ruling. It to me, it kind of falls in those like similar features don't stack kind of thing. So
if you have multiple sources of advantage, you still only have advantage.
The multiple temporary hit points, you only have the greater amount, that sort of thing.
And that's where I think it comes into, you talk to your DM before you decide to take these kind of things, because otherwise you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's an important thing to do before you start a campaign, is talk to them about that kind of stuff in your path.
Yeah, I feel sometimes, Corey, like you intentionally like throw me these softball segue things.
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
It is important to talk with your dungeon master before you start a campaign. And so that leads us very nicely into our topic for the day, which is on session zeros. So for those who don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, but session zero has become a fairly common term to describe, the session that you play before you play, right? It's just basically a chance for you and all of the people that you're playing with, including your dungeon master, most importantly, your dungeon master, I think, to just kind of sit down and establish some things, maybe discuss house rules, maybe talk about, what happened up until this point where, opening scene, how did we get here? Maybe make some character introductions, and or a number of other things. And so I wanted to just kind of talk about with you guys today, running a successful session zero. Why do we do them? When do we do them? How do we do them? What kinds of things do we talk about when we're doing them? And yeah, just kind of open it up and have a hopefully useful conversation about it. So let's kind of take these one at a time and answer sort of a few questions one at a time. First, and probably most important, is to you guys in your mind, what is a session zero? What are we talking about when we say session zero? What comes to mind?
Sure, I'll go first. So for me, at session zero, it's really just called a session only in name, because
Sure.
to me it could be, it's so informal. It could be an email thread, a chat. It doesn't have to necessarily be you sit down and meet together. But to me, it's fleshing out everything you want to get out of the way or get known before the game starts. So that's whether that's what classes are allowed. I mean, I personally would say all classes allowed, but whatever your DM is doing, setting the ground rules. What are the homebrew rules you're going to be implementing in the game? How are you handling crit damage? Are you doubling the dice? Are you max damage? Like all these kind of things that you want to figure out before the game starts, just to get everyone on the same page. And I would also say like gauging people's comfort levels with certain topics.
Absolutely.
So maybe like, hey, we want to do a political thriller, and it's going to get dark at some parts. Like, hey, is everyone okay with XYZ or whatever? And
does anybody have any triggers or phobias that they don't want to have deal with in the game?
Exactly. And yeah, so to me, that's the session zero, is making sure everyone is on the same page before the campaign starts.
Okay. What do you think, Preston? Anything you'd add there?
Nope, about the same. Just getting it together. Sometimes it can be useful as well for if someone feels like they're having writer's block or like not really sure what they're going to do with their character. If you sit down in a group and you're hearing how the other people are building theirs, sometimes that can also help spark ideas. So it's a way to just collaborate and come together as a group. So.
Okay. Yeah, I like that actually. And maybe we need to have our session zero for our next campaign sooner rather than later in that case, so that I can make a decision on the character that I want to play.
Yeah, it might be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, Corey, anything you'd add?
So I'm not a typical session zero kind of person. I usually like to roll a lot of the character introduction and stuff into session one and discuss things beforehand online or through chat. However, I do like to do session zeros leading into session one, and session zero is kind of like an hour or half an hour before the session, where new players can come in and kind of learn the game and get to create their characters live. And of course, back before D&D Beyond, that's typically what I would do with the session zero, is an hour beforehand where everybody sits down, they start going through the books, they kind of start developing their characters, and then somebody goes, oh yeah, so I'm making this character in this race, and they're like, oh, I'm making that race too. Do you want to be brothers, or do you want to be like bonded in some way, kind of thing? And you get to learn about the party kind of in real time and develop a more natural relationship.
Cool. I like that. So this may be redundant, but if you haven't yet discussed it, why do we do a session zero, do you think? Help people get more comfortable? Sure. Any other reasons that we haven't yet mentioned that it's important to run one?
Yeah, I think one thing, at least for me as a player, when I've gone to a campaign, a session zero has helped kind of ground the character in the world and it helps with the concept of like, where did they come from? Why are they doing what they're doing when the session one starts? Because usually session one is like, I mean, it can be whatever, but a lot of times like you meet in a tavern and across the way is the wizard. But like, why are you there? Why are you at this random tavern in Waterdeep? You know what I mean? So that session zero can be that time where you kind of talk about like, okay, I am here because XYZ and I'm with so-and-so who's also going to be in the campaign. And then so that way, like these two characters maybe have a reason while they're there, and kind of create these little sub parties that meet up to make the larger party, or even just to flesh out why individually while you're there.
Okay. I like that. I feel like there have been times where I've felt, walking in at session one a little more grounded and maybe sort of more invested in my character because, I was able to sit down with like one of you guys basically and say, hey, let's say that, our characters met before and they have this, relationship or whatever and all these things. And so that, and well, let's talk about why are we in this certain place when the campaign starts, so that then it's almost like when the scene opens at session 1, you don't feel quite, or at least
You've
I
kind
didn't
of
feel quite
explored the
so much
character more.
as like deer in the headlights, like what am I doing and who am I and what's going on, you know
What
I
does
mean?
my
It's like,
person sound like? What's their mannerisms? Like, how do
kinda
they
hit the
interact with
ground
people?
running a little bit.
Do I have an antagonistic? Maybe it's like a big brother, little brother type situation with the other person. Am I like constantly picking on them, or are they like elbow jabbing me all the time, or like what is that dynamic? And starting to build those. It's easier when there's not a spotlight on everything and there's not that pressure to perform in the session 0 because you're still just forming that. It's not like, okay, lights are on, camera's going, let's go. Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and it's a lot nicer to walk into a session that you already know kind of the interpersonal relationships between the party. It helps that party feel more natural when you actually get to the role-playing portion. Right. Basically, you kind of, instead of just being like, okay, you're all in a guild, and then everybody's kind of like, okay, we're supposed to know each other for years, but I'm super awkward around you all because I don't know any of you. Yeah, exactly. So it's a lot easier to kind of develop those relationships and to kind of, again, I kind of like the idea of taking like everybody knows everybody in one specific way, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but like, or at least like, two people and two people and two people kind of thing, like it. And so it kind of creates this nice little web. And there's a lot of systems out there that actually do that as part of character creation. It's basically like pick 2 other members of the party and discuss with them why you have a relationship with them in order to create a more coherent group.
Yeah, I like that. So finding additional outside resources to kind of help get the ball rolling, as it were. Okay, so let's talk about how. Now, obviously, I'm not going to claim, and I don't think any of us would, that there's like a right way and a wrong way necessarily to do a session 0. But, Corey, you kind of talked about ways that you've done it, maybe online, maybe, via chat or something, or maybe creating your characters right before the game starts and kind of giving everybody a chance to sort of figure it out together as a group. I like that. Other tips or ideas on sort of the logistics of how to run a successful campaign or session 0, that is?
So I would say number 1 tip is guide as a GM, but don't like actively direct, like, okay, what do you want your relationship with them to be? Let it be a little bit more natural. Sure. Let people talk about their characters and it's your job to just look at them and go, so where is your character from again? Or so what's something that your character aspires to be? Give them these little interview questions, like where does your character see them in 5 years? And let them kind of sit there and discuss it back and forth. And then somebody can be like, oh, well, my character kind of wants arcane knowledge too, but they want it forbidden wise. And so, oh, well, maybe we can have this cool relationship. Another thing that is a really important thing as a GM to do is nail down a good time that you can all meet. That's a great session 1 tactic, is to see what is the best time that everybody can play so that you can schedule these games. And listening as a GM, writing down a lot of notes, because if you're struggling or having trouble coming up with a good first level campaign, or your beginning campaign other than like broad strokes, well, this will help you kind of decide where your characters are going to be, what they're going to be doing, and what the players are going to get into. So you can kind of give yourself inspiration just by listening to what they discuss among themselves.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think Corey, you were the DM for my first 5e campaign, right, through 3.5 years ago. And I do remember you we didn't have a formal session 0, or at least if we did, I came late to the party. But I did appreciate sort of as I was creating my character initially, I remember you kind of sending me some text messages or something and kind of saying, hey, like, think about this or come up with that, or, or, let me know not just like your written backstory, but also like, something that happened in your past that, still haunts you, or that feels unresolved or something like that. And it just was enough of a prompt to kind of get me to go, you know what? Actually, now that I think about it, yeah, my character had this like this this run-in with I was a monk. I had this bad experience with like this half-orc monk in my monastery that ended up like robbing, stealing from the monastery and running off, and we sort of ended up having this fight and things, and I kind of got into it, and it ended up sort of influencing how my character interacted with another character in the game who was a half orc, and I've talked about it on the show before, but
Yeah.
we ended up constantly butting heads and having conflict, and I think we handled it in a way that hopefully, Reese, if you're watching, it didn't feel personal, but it did feel very like a great sort of character conflict. I think that led to some fantastic story moments, and I think it all started with that question that kind of just got me thinking, and led to some great role play and storytelling opportunities. So
Yeah.
I was
and
grateful
that doesn't have to be session 0.
right.
Keep that in mind. Like if you're struggling to find out backstory, just let it come naturally during the sessions as well.
Absolutely.
But if you do come up with something in a session 0, that's really cool, and that's something that everybody in your party gets to know about and kind of know, like, oh, we better be careful around half orcs with this monk because they might fly off the handle.
What do you guys think, Mr. Rogers? How any tips on the how?
I mean, Corey kind of nailed all the tips that I have, but I've seen online where people will, if they're doing like a really formal session 0, will do almost like a table contracts, if you want to say, not like anything official, but like, hey, we've all agreed we're going to meet at this time, and we're not going to have this trigger in the game or whatever, and make it just very formal.
Phones, you're going to get off this, or we're going to
exactly
do this.
Yeah, there's some
kind of a
resources
pledge
out there for that.
Yeah, and I've seen some like pre-generated things that you can kind of find online and tweak to your campaign's needs. Yeah. I don't know that I would necessarily use that with you guys, just because I think we're so familiar with each other already. But if I was doing a brand new campaign, I might
in a new group
grab that with a new group. I might grab that and be like, hey, let's just get on the same page here. But yeah, where we've been playing for forever, I think most of this is kind of implied at this point.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Preston,
I'd say for, I guess, a tip for if you're a DM that is DMing for brand new players, something that I found that was very helpful, because I've played with a wide array of different people, some with theater backgrounds, some of them that were so shy they barely wanted to talk to me. Right. And something that was really useful, a tool for me to be able to kind of get them out of their shells, is to begin to ask them about things that they liked. So if you are having trouble, or if you have a player that's sitting there and they're floundering on what they want to do, ask them about what their favorite TV show is. What's their favorite book? What's their favorite characters? Like, what are the attributes that they liked about those different things? Because then as you start to go down that path, that subtle shy person actually inside really enjoys maybe a more, I don't want to say emo, but like maybe a more like dodgy
Blood
character, someone who's very like edgy, and it's like, oh, well, I love that idea. And you'll see their face light up when they start to talk about it. And then you just basically yes and take that and say, that's a great, cool tool. Like maybe you could plug it into this. Here's some things that are available to you. Don't overwhelm them. Just go slow, like take it easy. But I think that was something for me was very useful to be able to help shepherd and introduce people into something that otherwise would become, okay, I'm rolling dice and it feels clunky. They jumped right into it. And so I think that's something that if you just keep that in mind and just watch people, they'll tell you what they love. You just got to give them enough time. So,
right. Nice. Okay. So can we come up with a definitive list of things that should be discussed at a session 0? Right. We've gone over a lot of them. Homebrew rules, kind of expectations of each other, time, things that sort of taboo topics or actions, etc.
No politics at the table, no whatever.
Yeah, no politics, no religion. That's usually my rule at the table. Sure. No out of game politics or religion. I should clarify.
Lots of in-game politics and
religion.
Maybe even for some people, I'm guessing like language may be an issue to include there in the I guess triggers or things that make you uncomfortable, right? I think ultimately the goal, of course, here is to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, that they don't feel sort of threatened, that they feel, and I think that really helps people to come out of their shell a little bit, like as Preston talked, especially if they're having a harder time getting into the character, getting into role play. If they're new, if they feel like they're in a safe space, it's just going to be a lot easier for them to kind of open up and just embrace and jump in, right?
Yeah, I would say I'm not a shy person, but if I was at a brand new table and I didn't know the people and it didn't feel safe, if it maybe felt like a little hostile, I don't know
Sure.
that I would role play the way that I do.
Right.
I'd probably
That's true.
kind of close off and be like, I roll an attack and just like, throw out my D20 or whatever.
Sure.
But like having that comfort level and knowing that like, hey, no matter what, we've talked about this, like I feel okay here. I know, no surprises. I mean, obviously some campaign surprises, but nothing like crazy.
Right.
Then I feel okay to role play and be this character and embody somebody else for a couple hours.
And I think it's important too, like that when you are having those kind of situations, and if it is a new group and it is a lot of people that are uncomfortable with each other, find ways to help shepherd the idea of celebrating each other's victories. Like if somebody does even a remotely funny British accent or something, like, wow, that was amazing. Like, I want to see more of that. That was great. Like just be their hype man, because everybody, they whether it's in theater and song, dance, whatever, a lot of people before they can get past that stage fright, they'll kind of hold back a lot of that stuff. And if you can unlock that gate, like there's so many awesome things that people just hide under. They hide those talents away because they're precious to them and they don't want to open up and get hurt. So just be aware that when people open up like that, just be kind.
Yeah, and Preston, I will say that that's something that I've long admired about you, that you've got a great ability to kind of draw people out like that, and also you are it's obviously a priority for you to sort of like kind of draw people out and sort of give them a chance to shine, and in ways that I could definitely learn a thing or two from you on that front. Let me ask this question, because as many viewers know now, we're planning on starting a new campaign here in a few weeks, and it's going to be a homebrew world that Corey's been hard at work on, and it's just it's very immersive and very detailed, and will be very, I'm sure it will feel familiar in many ways to us, but probably foreign in many ways to us as players, right? Because we're not super familiar with the geography, and there may be races that we've never met before and all those kinds of things. How much do you want to divulge, do you think, about the setting in a session 0? Do you want to leave some things open to discovery for your players? Do you want to just sort of give them like a world atlas and, a geography and a history of the, all of the different socioeconomic and political factions at war and all those kinds of things? And along those lines too, I mean, we could also talk about how much information is too much information to divulge about ourselves and our characters, right? Like, how much do we leave to sort of mystery for one another to learn about each other throughout the course of the game and through playing? Or do we just sit down and go, okay, let me just read you my whole backstory, everybody, so that you know who I am and where I've been and what my personality is like. Do we divulge that to one another, or do we sort of leave it up to one another to sort of explore and discover as the game progresses? All right, Corey, do you want to start off with that one? Since why don't we talk about the setting first? Like, how much information is too much information? How much is the right amount of information?
Yeah, so I've been obviously developing a lot of information for the world, and it took me a long time to kind of go back and forth on how much I wanted to give away, right? Obviously, you don't want to give away any secrets about your world, any sort of plot points that will be relevant for the campaign coming up. But you do want to give your players a general idea of where they're going to be playing on. And that can vary from campaign to campaign. Sometimes I've just gone in and done a single village. Like, this is the village you're starting in, which is in this country, and this about the kingdom. And then as you kind of expand, you can kind of have your players learn more and more about the world in game, and that's completely okay. But at the same time, I kind of like the idea of having my players have a general knowledge of what world they're getting into. Yeah. So so I kind of developed this sort of overview wiki style, where it was just like the basic information that anybody in this world would know about the town, city, anything that you guys are going to. And you guys can use that as a reference in game as well, instead of being like, oh, let me make a history check and see if I remember this capital city that we're in or anything about it. It's like, no, let's just, you can refer to that. And then I told you guys, this is the basic stuff, and then I've been adding little things in there, like little deeper things that only those of you that want to seek the knowledge, or that your characters would want to seek the knowledge, will know about. Because you'll want to go in there and you'll want to deep dive a little bit more, and you'll find an article that you haven't seen before, and that kind of thing.
And I like that, because I feel like it's easier to role play a character in a world that actually feels like they know something about the world that they live in, right? If you're just like completely blind, it's like, it's difficult to, I think, sort of get into character and feel believable when you're just like, I actually don't know anything about this place that I've grown up in all of my life, right? And so and even if, like you say, even if that just means, you're a small hobbit from Hobbiton and you've never taken more than 634 steps outside of the Shire. So but at least the Shire really well, right? You should at least know that much.
And the converse thing to do there is to not tell your players anything but like the absolute basics, because then you can kind of cheat and mold the world as it goes if you need to change something. Because there's certain things in my world that are static now. Right. That you guys have learned about, that basically if I try and pull a fast one on you, you're going to go, that's not how I remember it. And then I have to eat a little crow and say, well, I actually had to change that, kind of thing.
Sure. Okay. So, and those are the types of things, getting back to the topic of conversation, I suppose, that could be discussed in a session 0, whether that's a formal sitting down together and, okay, let me teach you about the world, or, over texts and chats and things like that.
Yep.
What about characters, though? I don't know, Mr. Rogers, what do you think about, like, how much information is too much information? I will admit that in our first session that we played together, me as a player was often frustrated by how little I felt like I knew about your character's backstory, right? I was like, who is this vampire chick that keeps like hunting him and like trying to kill him? Like, I don't know anything about this, and it makes me mad. And my character would ask, and you'd be a little coy about it, and that said, like, I think it probably led to some good like character and role play and storytelling moments in the game. So I'm not saying that was a bad thing. I'm just saying that me, like, I want to know everything, right? So I don't know.
I think it depends on the type of campaign you want to have, first of all, whether you guys have been together forever or not. And if you have, then maybe you know everything about each other at this point. But if it's like most campaigns where you're kind of meeting for the first time, or maybe the second or third time or whatever, I like to kind of keep my cards close to my chest, especially with like my character's secrets that I don't want people to know. And like, this is making me so excited for the new campaign, because I have secrets already from you guys.
You already have secrets.
He does.
Yeah. And I love it, because then you can, the DM, if they're a good DM, can kind of throw the breadcrumbs down. Corey is a good DM, and he does do this. And he throws the breadcrumbs down where I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what's happening. And other people are like, what's going on? Something's something bad is happening, and I don't know what it is. And then when it finally either builds and gets revealed, or the character decides, okay, guys, we're going to have a fireside chat, and I'm going to tell you, I'm finally comfortable enough with you guys to tell you this big dark secret I have, or whatever.
Right.
It leads to great role play, and maybe even some great combat if it's related to something that way. So I think keep your cards close to your chest. Just reveal what is absolutely necessary to have a party that interacts nicely with each other.
Yeah. Do you share your backstory with other characters in the game and say, like, this is player knowledge, but it might not necessarily be character knowledge? Or do you guys think even that's too much?
I think it depends. I would lean more towards, you can probably let the players know a little more, as long as they're okay with knowing, hey, my character wouldn't know this. Right. Still, though, I would keep the big reveals close to your chest, just because it's more fun.
Yeah. What do you think,
I was going to say, there's nothing stopping you too, is if you want to write a backstory for the players, and then a different backstory.
Mhm.
Not different, but like more
Or just
detailed or
redacted.
more, yeah, like a redacted version for the players, and then
All
one for the
blacked out.
GM.
Yeah.
Then that can be interesting as well. Just because as a DM, that's something that I always thrive on, is when somebody they leave those threads, or they leave something in there that's like obviously would be bothersome to that character, for me to be able to, okay, that this is something that I can hook into, not necessarily to lead them by the nose, but just give them a little bit of hey, if you want to do this, like, I'm going to pepper in this little thing that only, just like Dallin said, only you're going to recognize this, and if you want to go for it, that's, it's on you. So
Right.
but yeah, I love sharing, and I love reading other people's backstories.
Mhm.
I find that can help me be inspired to see, like, here's what I'm doing, and I'm building, and I kind of have an idea how I want this to work with that hometown that I'm coming from, and then I hear somebody else's, I'm like, oh wow, like, oh, that was really cool.
Yeah.
That gives me an idea for this other thing. So I would definitely, like, as it's been said 2-3 times now, keep the secrets close to your chest, but don't be afraid to share. I mean, because
Yeah, that's the thing for me. Like I enjoy writing when I have the time. And I love spending time writing like a good backstory for my character. And usually by the time I'm done with it, I'm like, oh, like this is something I'm really proud of. Like I want to share it with all the people that I'm playing with, but like that's gonna give away my secrets, and then I can't share it now.
just
And that
redact it.
makes me sad. So yeah, redact it. Just cover up some key names and words and
My
phrases.
backstory would be so boring, redacted.
I'm
Yeah,
this
yeah.
person. I came from this town. I was training in this place, and that's where you find me.
That's all you know.
Well, another way to get through it is, like, if somebody because for me, I feel like I'm more eloquent when I write than when I speak.
Yes.
And if my character, they are this really charismatic, like, whatever type character, and I'm stumbling over my words as a player, that can be sometimes frustrating. So, like, being able to do that kind of stuff, or something that I really enjoy doing in those session zeros was to go and do like voice experiments, and creating, like, I like to create little, like, listen to myself, record myself on how I sound and how I'm actually speaking. Maybe I'm reading as from the character's perspective, their backstory, like it's from their journal or something. And then that kind of helps me to get a little bit more into, like, role playing them a little bit. And if it's a good one, if it's good enough, then I'll share it with other people. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep those recordings stashed in a dark corner somewhere.
The solution to always bumbling and stumbling over your words in game is just to always make characters with an 8 charisma, and then
That's true.
you've got a great excuse.
Or an 8 intelligence.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah,
I seem to do one or the other.
I'm really charismatic, but I don't speak very well.
There you go.
You're a Zoolander.
Could be a charismatic mute.
That's a new class.
New subclass. Yeah, new subclass of Bard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Isn't that not Valor Bard? What's the college of
Glamour Bard.
Glamour Bard? Yeah, Glamour Bard.
There you go.
Steel.
Oh boy.
All right. So, anything else that you guys like to discuss in a session zero that we maybe haven't mentioned? For me, the one thing is, as you guys well know, I always like to know sort of how magic items are going to work in the game. Specifically, like, are they sort of readily available? Is this something that we could, like, potentially buy or craft? If so, how does that work? Just because obviously I like to plan my characters out long term in advance, right? And kind of think early on, like, okay, if I have a chance to get a magic item, what's the one that I would really like to get? And is that going to be possible for me to do? Because that's a big part of the game for me, and for I think a lot of people, right? Is feeling like your character is getting more powerful, not just via leveling, but also through loot, right? And it can be frustrating sometimes to, like, I don't know, you kill a dragon and you get some gold, and that's nice, but you don't really have anything to spend the gold on. And there's some magic items there, but none of them are particularly useful for you. And it's just kind of like, maybe we've all been, maybe it's the Diablo generation, and we've all been spoiled.
Everyone can use anything.
Yeah, but
or you get in there and you find this mega powerful item, but it's only attunable by XYZ class, and nobody in the party has that class, and you're like,
exactly.
That's a little bit on your GM too, though.
Yeah,
your GM should know that if you're not going to have a paladin in the party, don't give the party an item only usable by paladins.
Right. Replace it with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do you guys think that that's important to talk about in a session 0? Like,
do.
how do magic items function in game? What can you anticipate as far as being able to maybe buy them, maybe craft them, or is that something that you want to
I think
keep
it's
secret?
important to understand what your players want, like because some players they're going to want being the munchkin. Some people they want to be just the straight RP. They don't care about loot. They don't care about fights. And then you got you might have a murder hobo in there, or somebody who they're really interested in puzzles or like riddles. Like if you have a party that's in that kind of vein of stuff, then you just kind of need to adapt your stuff to what their preferences are, I think.
It beat me to the punch, Preston. I was going to say that exact same thing, that this is a great opportunity to ask your players what they want out of the game.
Yeah.
I think magic items fall into that homebrew section. Like, here's how magic
agree.
items work in my world, and here's what the gold cost is going to be. Everything. Thank you, Colby, for making me write out 321 different gold costs for different magic items and their availability for our next campaign.
At one point, Corey revealed that there was a spreadsheet, and I got so excited. You guys should have seen me. I was like, whoa, there's
It's a GM only spreadsheet.
A spreadsheet of magic items. I want to see it.
Forbidden spreadsheet.
Oh, that is a very titillating phrase right there, Dallin, for me. Forbidden spreadsheet.
Spreadsheets.
You can spreadsheets of desire.
So the other thing that I want to mention, since we are talking about it, is in the world for our upcoming campaign, magic items will be easily purchasable at most settlements. So keep your gold handy, players.
All right, I'm excited.
Right. Finally, a reason to spend gold.
I know,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Another reason to steal gold from your party. Wait.
No.
Wizards do already have a hard time with gold because they have to buy so much stuff. But
components, spell scrolls.
But outside of that, gold, there's literally like nothing to spend gold on.
Yeah.
So,
And that's I honestly, I feel like that's a failing on me as a GM, because I never really presented you with opportunities or complications that required a gold cost.
Or like buying real estate, or
I never
really acquired the one that was in the swamp, and
yeah, exactly. You forcefully acquired one that was in a swamp. It's infested with monsters again at this point. Let's be honest, guys.
Oh, we gotta go back and re-clear it.
Yep.
Okay. So, well, I mean, anything else that we're missing as far as important points to hit? I really like, Preston and Corey, what you guys were saying about asking your players what they want. And I think, just to reiterate that maybe in a session 0, because especially if you're starting with kind of a new group or a newish group, not only what kinds of things do you want in game, but maybe like what are, why do you play D&D? Like, what are the most fun aspects of this game to you? Is it the combat? Is it the role play? Is it exploration? Is it, puzzles and things like that? And maybe you could even have some sort of a ranking system, right? On a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or whatever, how important are these things to you in game, so that you don't end up creating a super combat heavy campaign for a bunch of players who they do combat, but it's maybe not, they kind of do the combat to get to the role play or whatever. Or vice versa, right?
Send out a survey monkey.
There you go.
I would just add one last thing and say the session 0 is not the only time you should be taking the pulse, though. I mean, right? It's a good start,
especially for timing. Timing should be like a weekly thing.
But people's idea of what they want out of the game might change, because maybe they didn't know what they were getting into, and they're like, well, now that I played this a little bit, especially for new players, I'm finding I really enjoy combat, and I'd like more combat or whatever. So I think maybe have, session 3.5. That's just like a chat. Hey, how's everybody doing?
Yeah.
Just kind of reevaluate as you go, just to make sure everybody stays happy and doesn't quit. And then you can't play D&D because everybody left your table.
That's the worst.
So bad.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Cool. Okay, well, why don't we wrap it up then? Thanks, guys, for joining the conversation today. I learned some things, and actually, as usual, I always kind of go into these thinking this might not be enough content for a full episode, and then we end up going longer than I think we're going to go, which is good, I think. So thank you for watching at home as well, and love you guys, appreciate you. Enjoy the week off from us and me, and we'll see you, in about a week and a half or so with lots more content coming your way. So anyway, until then, take care. Have a great day, great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.